Welcome to the Blue Yonder Overland podcast. I'm your main host, Jen, and I'm so excited to welcome you back to this show that is all about inspiring and empowering you to get more outdoor adventure into your life, however that looks, but especially to make overlanding more approachable. Each week, we bring you tips and tricks for vehicle-based adventuring, interviews with folks that are doing it, and just breaking down any mental barriers you may have to really embracing an adventurous life. If you have any comments or questions to follow up about this episode, feel free to send me a direct message at Blue Yonder Jen on Instagram or Threads, and we'll be posting all of the show notes and links on blueyonder-adventures.com, and there's also a contact form there if you're not on social media and want to send a comment that way. Welcome back to Blue Yonder Overland Podcast. Today I'm also joined by my husband, Matthew Hager.
Hey, everyone.
And before we dive into today's topic, I thought I would start by just checking in terms of what has been inspiring us to live more adventurously lately. So anything top of mind for you, Matt, as you think about the last week?
Yeah, I think in this period of time where we don't really have the Tacoma, since it's out of commission, we've been looking for other things to still sort of scratch that adventure itch without it being overland focused. And I think the two that really jump to mind right now are, one, seeking out good live music. I think last Friday we got to see the Bainbridge Island Symphony, which was pretty cool. I had no idea that was even a thing. And then on Saturday, going out to the Quilcene Lantern and hearing some great musicians play.
Yeah.
Both of those are great.
Yeah.
And then I've been working on the menu for our Ode to Peach meal, which is growing ever more fun and ever more out of control. And
just for benefit of our listeners, so Ode to Peach is a meal that Matt has just decided is going to be a thing that he does on a semi-regular basis. It all stems from a couple of amazing dishes that he made while we were out camping near Mount Rainier, actually, that incorporated peaches because it was at the height of peach season here in Washington. And those turned out so good that they have now inspired him to do a whole annual meal around celebrating the peach.
Yep. It's a fruit we're celebrating, especially in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, where we have access to such great peaches.
Yeah.
All right. How about you, Jen? How have you been scratching the adventure itch these days?
I guess the easiest answer is I've been trying to really reach out and make new friends and notice what's going on in the community, try and find new ways to get involved in the community. So it kind of scratches the same adventure itch because it's scary to put yourself out there. But I actually just put together a little newcomers to town potluck picnic event for the end of next week. It'll be here in Kingston, and it's just a free event for people that are fairly new to the area. I put a random cutoff date of the last 5 years or so to just meet up and connect with other newcomers to town. And let me tell you, it was super, super scary to go and post the flyers and to post about the event on Facebook because it's just scary to attach your name to something public and put it out there and then be prepared to receive inevitable feedback from people who will criticize it for any reason, just because they can, especially online. So, yep. That's kind of where I'm dealing with, like, doing something that's outside of my comfort zone. And yeah.
And resisting the urge to hide from citizens against virtually everything, or cave people, as I like to call them.
That's a great acronym. That's a good point. Yeah. I think it's really easy to criticize other people's efforts to do anything, whether it's creative or otherwise. And it's always harder to be the person trying to do it. So trying to keep that in mind and just kind of let any potential criticism fall off my back and just kind of proceed forward with trying to do something. So,
well, way to go, hon.
Yeah. We'll see how it turns out. I'll have to update the podcast on a future episode. So that's adventurous inspiration for the week for both of us. And then diving into today's topic, there's a lot of different things we could discuss about taking others overlanding with you. And we've touched on it sort of briefly in some of the interviews that I've done. Actually, with Will Curry from Campbridge, we talked a little bit about bringing his kids camping, and he had some great advice that actually I think resonates across anyone that you're bringing camping for the first time. But I wanted to specifically spend an episode thinking about bringing people out overlanding and camping with you who are less familiar with it, and things that you want to keep in mind, extra things you might need to do in preparation, how you communicate about it with them. And this could also relate to either groups of people or bringing a partner camping with you for the first time, which you, Matt, have a lot of experience with both. So I thought it would be fun to unpack with you, because it's just something that we're always such proponents of bringing people along with us, but trying to get in the mindset of how we approach it, how we communicate, and how we actually do it to share those lessons with others.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really great conversation. I've always sort of liked to say there's 3 things in life that you have to or get to do. You have to work, you have to or get to spend time with friends and family, and you have to or get to spend time outside. And it's really great when you can combine 2 things. And so how do you get your friends and family out camping with you so that you get to both be outside but have time with that? And so much of it comes down to preparedness.
Yeah.
I certainly have made the mistake of combining new site finding with going out with friends. Sometimes it's worked. If you ask our friends Brad and Lauren, sometimes it hasn't. I think, we told the story of how you and I, our first camping trip together, that was a case where I knew exactly where I was going. First time I took Brad and Lauren out, it was the exact opposite. We decided to route find and introduce them to dispersed camping. They ended up, it rained on us, and their car was parked in a giant puddle. So
luckily they're very adventurous people, and so they embraced it, liked it anyway, but you wouldn't get that lucky with everybody.
Yes. So, first piece of advice is, if you're bringing out people, unless they've come out with you before and shown interest in the exploration route, go to someplace
Yeah.
We always evaluate locations for how good they would be with groups. And it's some things to consider are where and how are they sleeping? So if you don't have, a bunch of elevated sleeping solutions, are you going to be setting up tents and having people sleep on the ground? In which case, having a spot that has, the equivalent of a tent pad or a flatter, softer area that isn't terrible to sleep on is something to look for. Ease of getting there from different vehicle perspectives. You might have a case where, sure, you're pulling up with your Tacoma and your trailer, but someone's coming in a Mazda CX-5 or something with less ground clearance, or even a 2-wheel drive. I mean, I think about the last time we went out to Hood Canal and seeing sort of the different vehicles that showed up to the camp spot that was near us. So those are two huge considerations. Going beyond those, I think the biggest thing when going out with other people is just thinking through their interaction with the experience versus yours, and plan around theirs, and then adapt to fill your needs. So
what's an example of that? Because I'm having trouble picturing what you mean by that.
Yeah. So a perfect example might be, let's take going to the bathroom. When we go out, I don't always set up the toilet, particularly if we're just doing an overnighter. I'm like, number 2s will hold it and we'll go squat, or your face squat, or go behind a bush and pee. Making the assumption that everyone is comfortable with that isn't a good assumption.
Right.
So when I go out and I have people meeting us out there, I will always throw up the the bathroom tent, in that case, I throw up the one that's sort of remote, not attached to the vehicle.
Yeah.
Because people want their privacy. They want to get away. No one wants to be going pee
right next to someone else.
Friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's a good example. Like, even though I would be comfortable with it, and they might also be comfortable with it. But even if you ask someone, hey, are you okay if we do X, Y, Z? Are you okay if we just pee around the bushes? Don't assume that, people are going to want to be lower burden.
Everyone likes to believe they're low maintenance, but they might not actually be.
Yeah. So just taking that away and finding opportunities to make it comfortable. And I'll throw the caveat in, unless you absolutely know you've done it with people multiple times. Yeah. But I think for the purpose of this, we'll assume it's people that you're going out with really for the first time. You're introducing them to the experience. Always, play to the most comfortable common denominator.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think we've also touched on then the importance of communication. And I think both communication ahead of time and not being afraid to get explicit about some of the details that people don't think to ask about or maybe aren't comfortable asking about. And if you can figure out a way to introduce some of those topics pretty early on, I think that also influences whether people will even agree to do the activity with you. Because that's the other thing I've discovered as we've taken friends out is everyone's concept in their head of what camping or car camping is very, very different. And when you introduced me to it, I was prepared for like essentially a backpacking camping in a tent weekend. And instead you introduced me to this totally new, what I consider luxury camping experience. And so it's just a totally different thing to wrap my head around. But like you say, you had played to kind of the lowest common denominator and making me comfortable. But I think it's worth being pretty explicit when you're even inviting folks and describing some of the basics. Like, well, if you came out with us, I'm not sure, you asking them about their sleep setup and like, would they need to borrow a tent or do they have one? Would they be more comfortable on cots or do they plan to bring maybe an air mattress? But getting explicit about some of those sleeping details, about some of the eating details, like, hey, we've got a cooking solution. We'd be planning on providing most of the meals. Maybe you bring some fresh food along to add to it. And then the bathroom situation. I think those are the three big things that people can have very different ideas on. So touching on sleeping, bathrooms, and how you're going to eat particularly are helpful.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I think, dead on. There's gathering the knowledge needed to understand what people are bringing, not only so that you know what you need to bring based on sort of your enhanced knowledge, but also so that you're not bringing stuff unnecessarily.
Yeah.
An example might be if they say they're bringing a sleeping bag and it's a moderate temperature day or night, then don't bring a spare sleeping bag. If you're bringing a spare sleeping bag, or if they say they're bringing a sleeping bag and it's going to get down to 20 degrees at night, either ask the question, hey, what's your sleeping bag rated to? Or bring a better sleeping bag.
Or extra blanket.
Or extra blankets.
Heated blanket. Something. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really great. And then I think the piece that you hit on around communication too, and I think this is the one that I've run into the most as just a little disruptor, is around food. In the overlanding space, I always think, hey, if I'm I sort of plan around a meal and a person provides food for that entire meal. So if, let's say, friends are coming and they ask, hey, how can we help? We'd love for you to do breakfast on Saturday morning, and making sure that they know that is feeding the entire group for that meal. Whereas where I think that comes in a big counter is backpacking. And when backpacking, you sort of just bring your own food for each meal, and then you just sit around and eat together.
Yeah.
And I
And
don't
it's
think
worth,
that's
yeah,
entirely true, but making sure that that distinction is clear.
yeah, worth verifying which approach they want to take. And if they have a lot of dietary issues or whatever, it may be, maybe it's easier for everyone to just bring their own meals and plan on that. But it's definitely good to touch base on that ahead of time, just because it is so often that we'll do communal meals for a lot of our overlanding experiences. And yeah.
Yeah, and what we've learned is sometimes it's better to go with one strategy for one meal and another strategy for another. So let's say if you're doing dinners, you do dinners as a group. But lunches, if you're out biking and doing stuff, like it might be that you eat at different times. What you want to eat, what you think about for lunch is different. And so having everyone sort of provide their own lunch, or, we've done a similar thing at breakfast. If some people are big breakfast people and they want to get up early and make pancakes and eggs, by all means. But if someone wants to sleep in and just have some oatmeal, absolutely. So that's just the communication ahead of time and thinking through a plan. I do find that as the camp host, it is helpful to always bring a little more food than you need.
Yeah.
If you have been out backpacking, you're definitely familiar with sort of food stress and like, oh no, there's not enough, get a little angsty. Having that extra food and being able to deal with when something goes wrong. Oh no, the fridge died, or oh no, I didn't bring something, or I think the one that comes up the most often is like, oh, we planned on having a salad, but I froze the lettuce again because I put it at the bottom of the fridge. Being ready to handle some of those in a semi-graceful way is always excellent.
Yeah, especially as a camp host, because certainly we take our hosting duties pretty seriously in terms of really wanting any friends we come out with to love overlanding as much as we do and hopefully want to do it again. So we have this strong incentive to want to make it a good experience. And that usually means over-preparing from our standpoint and bringing extras and anything else we can think of where maybe they forgot or won't have thought of this. And if we have an extra we can throw in, great, we'll do it.
Yeah, and we do that a lot with things like blankets or extra jackets or our Mombies. Which, have you talked about Mombies on this yet?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. One of our favorite
Excellent.
pieces of gear.
Yes.
Insulated blankets.
Yes. The ultimate outdoor comfort clothing item. It's not even a clothing item, but
essentially a Snuggie on steroids.
So I think, that's the big piece. We were talking about communication and planning. Think food, think over communicating, think through alternatives and scenarios. And as the host, be ready with some backup options.
Yeah. And also just thinking through sort of the vision for what the whole experience and day is, and kind of being willing to talk through even at a general level, sort of expectations about okay, we're going to roll into camp Friday night, arrive whenever you want, but plan to eat on the way. Saturday, we'll plan to do stuff around camp in the morning and enjoy a great breakfast. And then maybe if people want to go hike this trail or go paddleboard in this lake, those are the options. And then, so sort of painting a picture of what the experience would be like that you would be able to provide or help to provide. That way they can kind of know up front what they're signing up for and raise any questions they might have of oh, well, I'm not really into hiking, but I want to do this activity. Is that possible? Yes.
Yeah. Some more examples of things to talk through are, activities for the day. Is everyone going mountain biking, or are some people going hiking? Or some people is their preferred thing to sit on the most comfortable chair at camp and read a book, or set up the hammock and relax? Or, if you are prepping a big meal, does someone need to stay back and babysit the smoker?
If someone were to pack a smoker along, not saying anyone would do that, of course.
Yeah. Speaking of Ode to Peach meals, that was smoked steak sandwiches with peach and Manchego cheese
and balsamic.
That's right.
Glaze.
We did throw a nice balsamic glaze on there.
It was just melt in your mouth perfection. Especially and that's the other thing. After a day of outdoor activities, particularly if everyone has participated in a hike or mountain bike or something, you can be guaranteed that the food will taste good no matter what. Just adds that little extra edge because everyone's actually hungry.
Yeah.
I think one other aspect on communication that's helpful to touch on, it's super logistical focused, is like Matt said, if you're planning a group trip, to go to a spot you already know. So hopefully you've also noticed whether you have cell service at that spot and where you lose cell service en route to that spot, and making a note of that and saving those coordinates or saving that on a Google map where you could easily share it with folks, because that is also like the number one logistical thing, is making sure either you've got cell service all the way to the spot so that inevitably questions can be texted or they can call if they have trouble following your directions. But if they don't have cell service, where's the last point where they would be able to call? And then thinking through how you provide them instructions to actually get that last mile to the spot.
Yeah, this is a lesson. I don't know if we've really figured out the perfect solution in all scenarios. Maybe we certainly have come up with some of the problems.
We could talk through a few examples of things we've done.
I think one, going to your comment first, is also different carriers have different cell coverage.
Yep.
We're sort of lucky that we know coverage for two of them. I have T-Mobile, and I think you're on Verizon. So, having that knowledge base. But if you assume you don't have that knowledge base, the pre-planning of communication of routes is key. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made early on was assuming that everyone would have an app like Gaia, or if I sent them links, say, to coordinates on Gaia, which naturally pulls up Gaia as an app, that they would download that and use that, and that it would be totally intuitive. I think what I learned is people are comfortable with Apple Maps and Google Maps.
Unless they're already into overlanding. But if you're bringing out new folks, they probably don't.
New folks case, so one, understanding if I'm going to send some coordinates, what do they look like on Google Maps and Apple Maps? So while I never would have thought of navigating out to those spots, I will actually pull them up and see, what is Apple Maps trying to do? What is Google Maps trying to do? Does it match with what I agree is the way to go? Does
it actually recognize the Forest Service roads, for instance?
Exactly. And so in the absence of that, what I have done is really backtrack the route to where Apple or Google messes up, and then start providing directions with
like turn by
turn directions as clear as I can.
Even with photos, we've documented on one occasion.
Yeah. And then also, if in particularly difficult areas, I'm thinking of one of the spots up near Rainier, we've actually left a walkie-talkie down in the area so that when they get to a spot,
like a junction point,
they could grab the walkie-talkie. We would communicate where that is and usually sent a picture of it before we left that area. And then they can sort of reach out and squawk on the walkie and let us know that they're coming. We check the range of that first and sort of work out all those logistics. And I think that's...
Or worst case scenario, we like send somebody down to meet them in a vehicle, like a lead vehicle, if we can spare one or have that ability.
Yeah.
Or figure out a way to meet them at a junction point, either before it gets difficult or before they lose cell service, or say like, hey, if you run into any issues, provide a backup plan. I guess that's the other thing we've done in pretty much all those situations. Doesn't matter what solution we've used to provide them detailed instructions, always had a fallback plan. Like, if this fails, what can you do, or where should you proceed to, and then try to get in touch for a backup.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it also really comes down to, as we talk through some of these more difficult scenarios, they are usually with people that we have gone out with before. So they have a little bit more comfort in the situation. We have more comfort in knowing how they react to situations and what to expect. if I'm taking people out to first go at it, I definitely go with we're going to caravan out there, or it's an easy spot to navigate to.
Yeah. Or I'm going to come down and lead you up there if we've saved a spot, and then we're going to lead them up a slightly more difficult route.
Yep. And interesting note, helpful tip on saving a spot. When you are in a vehicle with, say, a rooftop tent or something like that, where if you leave the vehicle, you might lose the spot, set up your campsite. Like we have brought an extra tent and set up like a tent day use. And
our tent and like cooking equipment.
Yeah, cooking equipment, chairs, our camp stuff chairs. Like that. We tend to be pretty trusting out there. It's never, bitten us in the rear.
Yeah.
But like I will leave our table and chairs out if we leave the spot. Stuff like that, just to make it look occupied.
If we have to go lead someone in for the last
we're not
few
leaving
miles.
it for a ton of time, a full day or anything, just for an hour or hour and a half tops. So just one helpful tip there.
Yeah. Especially, like you say, if your vehicle setup is such that you need to pack up your sleeping quarters. But even if, you're thinking of leaving a trailer or whatever, we have, I guess, erred on the side of being trusting, and luckily found most folks respect that. I think they're not looking to intrude on anyone else's stuff. They're just looking for an unoccupied spot, just like we did.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think what comes to mind on some of those examples we just shared for me would be stories of camping near Mount Rainier. We found a couple of amazing sites, and including like direct views of Mount Rainier, beautiful panoramas. And I'm thinking of the first one that we found. We noticed that it was probably a mile or so where you definitely were out of, at least a mile, where you're definitely out of cell coverage. And you were kind of beyond the more standard forest roads. Like you passed a well-used trailhead, and then it was at least another mile beyond that where there was a junction point with a less well-used forest road. And so the first time we were out there trying to connect with my sister who was coming to join us, we definitely told her to let us know, like send a text when we passed the point where we knew she'd have cell service. And it was the closest point we could be certain that she would have cell service. And we knew we were going to set up Starlink so we'd be able to receive an iMessage on an iPhone. If we hadn't had that, though, then we had like a fallback plan of like, okay, if we haven't heard from you by X time, then we'll go back down to the cell service spot and give you a call and see where you're at. And then it was similar when we took my parents out to a similar nearby spot, and they had rented a van. And in that case, we went and saved the spot the night before and kind of set up our whole camp. And I drove separately, I believe, so that I could go and meet them out at the road, because I knew they were going to be in a rental vehicle and navigating new and unfamiliar terrain to them. So I wanted to drive it with them. And so I drove a second car back out to meet them, and then rode with them for the drive-in, which worked well for getting new folks in a totally new environment and a new vehicle out to the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly one of those scenarios where if we could have, and logistics had worked, I mean, the preference is always to caravan.
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah.
Especially, this sort of comes into the next point is you become largely the recovery person, the person with those extra tools.
Yes. That's a really good point.
And so, if someone, let's say, gets stuck in sand, it's much easier to recover them if you're there with the truck, and you can, pull them out, or you can help them use recovery boards, traction boards for the first time. Any of those. It's much harder when you get the text, "I'm stuck." Yeah.
You have to go find them.
And then, it's like, okay, let me close up the rooftop tent, start driving away, deal with that. Have the stress of them being stuck and being stressed out and all those things. But, I think as I'm sitting here talking with you, Jen, about this, the one thing I want to emphasize is don't let the difficulty be the reason to not take people out.
Yeah. There's always a way to mitigate it. Mm-hmm. With just a little bit of thinking about it ahead of time.
Yeah. And I would say I would go as far as saying, as you think about doing this and you're taking the first people out, start with easy people. Start with people who you think would enjoy it, have a little bit more capability, like learn and build the mechanisms to do it and do it well. And then, start bringing much. We are at this point where we would bring just about anybody out camping with us. Anyone who shows any interest at all, we will find a date and we will take them out and figure it out. That would not have been how I would have done it in the beginning. I specifically, I really like Brad and Lauren, but I brought them and did it first with them because I knew that how they handled situations. And I was like, even if this goes wrong, it'll be fun. And it was. Yeah. So, I think that as far as I can think, as far as our discussion goes, like advice for getting people out really comes down to plan, communicate, and do it.
Yeah. I think something that came up in the conversation with Will and how he kind of got his daughters more into camping and enjoying being a part of sort of planning and participating in their trips was thinking through how to get them more personally involved in some of the decisions about the trip, which I thought was really cool and could apply to pretty much anybody.
Yes.
Like if somebody has a vested interest in, like they were either helping to pick the activity that you'd be doing or maybe helping to pick the menu or the dinner for one of the meals, or in some way has sort of bought in, they are kind of contributing to the trip in some way, it makes them feel a more of a sense of ownership. And I think that can also sort of change the mindset of people and make them a little bit more bought in terms of helping to roll with the punches and problem solving and just really participating in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And it's one that I have struggled with in the past. I mean, I love to camp cook, but it's really easy and people want to help and be part of it.
Yeah.
So giving them and having them cook a meal is great. And then letting them fully own it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where people, particularly who do some camping, who say you're taking someone who really does campground camping, they have pots and pans and stuff like that. And they will likely want to make dinner one night and probably use their setup. So even assuming that someone will then want to use your setup because it's better or anything, just hands off, use it as a relaxing point.
Yeah.
Let them run. I'll always offer to, help or if they need anything. But I think I have tended to sometimes be too involved and too like, oh, you could use this. This is cool, such a cool thing or whatever. Versus, man, sitting in a chair and reading a book.
Yeah. Letting them serve you breakfast is great. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it really does change the dynamic and makes everyone feel sort of a sense of ownership of the trip too, which helps.
Yeah. The one caveat I'll give is if you are the knowledgeable person on the right way to say handle wastewater or deal with bears don't not do something or say something because of what I just said.
Yeah. Right.
Help with dishes. Always do dishes. That's my opinion.
Says the person who likes to use the sanitized wipes to wipe the dishes and then give the dishes a full wash when we're back home with their dishwasher.
I have my cheats. Provide that guidance. But
yeah, getting people involved both, I think, in the planning and giving them a piece to own of the execution. I think it's just a good thing. And honestly, it's one of the things. We referenced this in one of our first episodes, but it's one of the things you did well with me the first time you took me out too, is just giving, like you had even brought gear that was specifically for me, whether it was a koozie or an extra toothbrush or just making me feel like I was a part of it and you'd kind of planned for that. But I was also very upfront with you. And when we were setting out and saying like, hi, I don't want to be just showing up to camp and letting you do everything. Please teach me. Like, I want to learn how to unpack things, how to pack things, how to set things up in the way that you want them so that I can be an active participant in this. And then I think that really helped too, to just kick off that conversation right from the outset.
Yeah. Goes back to the communication piece.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of any other sort of helpful. We talked on some of the logistical things around whether it's GPS coordinates or knowing where you're in touch with people. If there's any other either logistical or sort of gear related items that it's worth discussing for especially bringing groups with.
A few things pop to mind. One of the things you will deal with if you are, say, everyone's bringing their own chairs, but you want to have a dinner all sitting together. Camp chairs come in many different heights and distances from the ground. So finding that common table height might not be doable.
Yeah.
So just thinking about these things, how do we all eat dinner together? And it may or may not be doable around a table. I think that's one that comes to mind. Foul weather gear and handling windy scenarios. I think, the one comes to mind of sort of, I would do it again in a different way, is that windy night in Leavenworth.
Yeah.
Where both of us were just thinking we won't disturb the other person, even though
the other
we want
party.
to go.
Yeah.
Having to say, if the wind doesn't die down, we're going to leave.
Yeah.
Saying that at 6 p.m. when the wind hadn't died down, or 9 p.m. before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Or try to go to bed. And then the second thing is, if you're being woken up by weather, everyone's being woken up by weather. So
don't overthink
hesitate.
it.
Yeah, don't hesitate to go like, hey,
guys in the tent, next tent over.
We're thinking about moving.
Yeah.
We're thinking about getting out of here.
Yeah.
Because neither of us are sleeping and this isn't fun.
Yeah.
Do you want any help packing up your tent before we go?
Yeah, that was a big lesson learned. Apologies to Dan and Anna, who are our guinea pigs on that trip. They had a lot of patience, but we all got up the next morning at like 6 a.m., not having slept at all due to the wind. And yeah, we probably should have just all packed up in the middle of the night and found a more sheltered spot somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good lesson learned.
Yeah. One more thing that comes to mind, first aid. In particular, medicines and things, having...
Just to deal with common ailments, whether it's Excedrin for a migraine or Pepto-Bismol for an upset stomach, just things that people are it's not an ordinary situation, but you're out camping and you never know how you might react to eating something, or maybe you brushed up against a plant that has irritated you and having a anti-itch ointment or cream on hand.
Yep.
Those things. Yeah.
You could almost guarantee that anyone you're bringing, particularly for the first time, won't have something like that.
Exactly.
Make sure you have enough of that for you and everyone else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just being able to plan for some of those contingencies. And that was the thing I was going to mention too, is whether it's planning for some first aid or common ailments that people might run into, or planning for sort of foul weather or foul conditions, like maybe too many bugs in the summer, recognizing that you're likely to have more gear and more ways to mitigate that situation because you've been out in it more than your guests that you're bringing with. And so making sure to pack enough to deal with that situation, both for you and the guests, whether it's bug spray or extra citronella candles, or bringing bug screens for a large enough tent that you can all sit in if you have to be stuck inside a tent to even enjoy dinner together. Those types of things we've been found very helpful for larger groups.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess the other thing we could also mention in dealing with groups is cooking for groups, depending on how big it is, can be quite a bit different than cooking for a group of 4 or 6. Like thinking about once you get beyond a certain number, it changes the game a lot. And we could probably do a whole separate episode on this. So maybe if there's anything just top of mind.
Yeah, I'll give 3 things top of mind. The first one is your pots and pans and things are much smaller than you're used to.
Yeah.
That sort of leads into some of the others. Don't plan meals that require everything to come out at the same time.
Yes.
So let's take, for example, burgers. Burgers are a great thing to cook. Easy to cook. You don't need much specialized equipment. Make your salad. Have people eat the salad. Start cooking the burgers next. Right? Where I think we're very used to, okay, I'm going to have my burger. I'm going to have my salad. I'm going to have fruit salad, side. All this
whatever
on one plate. It's going to be beautiful. Nope. Have people eat the salad. Have people eat the thing. Then have them gather around as you cook burgers. One burger comes off. Someone eats it. Another burger comes off. Someone eats it. It's camp eating at its best. And it's camp cooking at its easiest.
Yeah.
The third piece is thinking about prep and what you're bringing and storage. Sort of all those things come together in cooking for a large meal. It may be hard, say, for example, to make a large salad that's lettuce-based.
Yeah.
For example, one lettuce tends to freeze pretty easily. It seems like no matter where you put it in the fridge. Although you don't have to refrigerate lettuce, so don't. I certainly do all the time, freeze my lettuce, so I should learn that eventually. But also it takes a big bowl.
Yeah.
So go with like a Greek salad with cucumbers and tomatoes and some red onion. All those things pack pretty small. Sometimes you could cut them pretty easily ahead of time. Or even if you're on site, like it doesn't take that large of a cutting board.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those three things, we could talk really about large meal prep and cooking as a whole other episode, but definitely order of operations, where and what you're making, and then pre-prep.
Pre-prep as much as possible. Yeah. Well, I think those are super helpful and actionable tips, Matt, for anybody taking folks out camping. So thank you for that. Yeah. And thanks for this conversation.
Absolutely. Hope your listeners get out there and bring some friends with them. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah. Would love to hear any comments or questions that this episode inspires.
Also, if you've figured out how to pack lettuce without it freezing or melting in the heat, let me know.
Thanks, guys. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, thanks so much for your time today. I'd love it if you could hit like, subscribe, whatever the appropriate interaction is on the platform that you're listening. And do let me know if you've got any comments or questions at Blue Yonder Jen on Instagram or Threads. And if you're curious to do a little bit deeper dive into what exactly overlanding is, why we love it so much, and more resources and specifics on finding campsites, we talk about that in our first couple episodes, so recommend going back and giving those a listen. I'll be back next week with more, but in the meantime, hope to see you out in the wild blue yonder.